So before the prayer of invocation, we're just going to pause, for a brief moment of silence. Can you just close your eyes and bow your head with me now for a brief moment of silence? O Holy One, O Gracious One, we break the moment of silence now, and we come boldly before your throne of grace. We look now into the hills from which cometh our help. For all of our help comes from you, for you are the maker, creator, and sustainer of the heavens and the earth. Gracious God, we invoke and invite your presence to be with us. And God, as you entrusted the law to Moses upon Mount Sinai, we thank you for the laws that you've entrusted to our leaders. We pray now for Chief Justice James E.C. We thank you for the contributions you've made through his leadership and through his life. God, cover and keep and bless him now. This is our prayer in the blessed name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Amen. Bless you.
Good morning. Good morning. The welcoming occasion here. This event actually is planned back in May or June, and it came about. Justice Perry and myself went to Florida A&M University and just had a dialogue with some of the students there. And one of the things that I see now when you go around to the campuses, particularly HBCU campus, is the dialogue and the exposure that the students don't have. I think that we have to do a lot more of exposing students and their mind and their thought processes. And by doing that, growing up country boy in Wakulla County, for me, listening to my elders and what they've gone through, some of the things that they've done, that whole learning process, I think we're missing it now. So opportunities like this, you can have a justice, a Florida Supreme Court justice, willing to come and engage you. There have only been 4 African-American Florida Supreme Court justices in Florida, period. But having one willing to take time out of his schedule and say, I'm here, and I'm willing to have a conversation and a dialogue with you is important. The second thing that I've learned since coming on at VCU is that the adage of, enter to learn, depart to serve. You have to know how to serve. And I think this dialogue and this conversation is about serving. How can you go about the business of serving your community, your civic responsibility, your community responsibility? That's the type of conversation and dialogue with this limited time we'll have. But this will be one of many. It's not about just bringing one person. It's bringing a lot of folk here because iron sharpens iron. So when you leave, that you'll have an experience, that you can tell your child that I actually had a conversation with a sitting justice of the Florida Supreme Court. Those are the things that we need to pass on to make our communities better, to make our families better. Because at the end of the day, here in Florida, right here in the state of Florida, we pay, and I say we as taxpayers, $600 million a year for the Florida Department of Juvenile Justice. We pay $2 billion, $2 billion with a B, for the Department of Corrections. And whether you go to the Department of Juvenile Justice or the Department of Corrections, the largest single population in both of those institutions are black males. So if we're willing to pay almost $3 billion as the state of Florida to incarcerate them, we ought to be a bit about the business of educating them. And that's what we're here for, to have that conversation. So without further ado, I'll have your own Judge Grimes to come up and introduce the speaker. I've met Justice Perry a couple of years ago, but Judge Grimes knows a lot more of the secrets than I do, so I'll let him expose a few of them.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Good morning. And to all of you as part of the Wildcat family, of course we acknowledge Dr. Jackson as our president. See Dr. Doolittle here as our VP, and I may have to quite get the title a little bit off there, but we're grateful for all of you this morning. To Dr. Thompson, who is in charge of this particular area of concentration, and I believe Mrs. Flint, who is heading the Criminal Justice Division here. And we just want to say grateful to see all of you here this morning. I get the distinguished honor this morning of being able to bring up someone that has the title of being a Supreme Court Justice, but one who I deem to be a friend. We've known each other, and of course, as the years started to unfold, we say, man, it's been almost 30 years now that our paths have crossed in one way or the other. Of course, we know that all of you are technologically literate, and so therefore you can Google all of the biographical information on Justice Perry. Most of you probably already have. So I'm going to just highlight about a couple of those points, and then I'm going to tell you about him as a man and as a friend. And it's important that you understand that, because the conversation today, while on the one hand it is very tragic that we're here and that we acknowledge the fact that the young man, Michael Brown, out in Ferguson, Missouri, is being laid to rest today, and yet we know there are a lot of other Michael Browns around this country. And so his conversation today is not just going to be limited to that. He's going to be talking about things that he believes from his heart are important to you for your success, so that you might be able to one day not only be successful in your respective careers, but we're looking for those people who will come along and will take our places and will continue to run their leg of the race. Justice Perry, before he became a justice, he's a North Carolina native. Of course, he grew up in segregated schools, but that was not a limitation for him. That, in fact, was part of what made his bounce so high, because he knew that he had to always work hard. He was determined, even early on in his life, of what his long-term goals would be. Yet, even after going to school at St. Augustine, we know that he graduated, and then, of course, because of those things known as the Vietnam War, he was interrupted in part of his education. And so he spent time serving in the military, again, talking about public service. Thereafter, of course, he came out of the military, but yet was determined he was going to continue that desire to become a lawyer. And of course, he attended Columbia University in New York, where he attended law school. And of course, that became something very special for him in more ways than one, because not only did he receive a law degree from there, but he met the beautiful and illustrious woman who will become his wife, and none other than Dr. Adrian, who's here with us this morning, very highly esteemed educator in her own right. And of course, thereafter, they continued their sojourn together. It's a very challenging time period in our country's history. And they were determined to make their mark and to do everything they could to impact not only the communities in which they lived, but the lives of young people in particular. She is an educator, having been retired, of course, recently from Stetson University, and of course, where she was the dean of the Department of Education, and as well as active in other areas too. Justice Perry practiced law in the Orlando, Orange County, Seminole County, Central Florida area for a number of years. In the year 2000, he was appointed as the first African-American circuit court judge for the 18th Circuit, which is Seminole and Brevard counties. We both served as circuit judges during that entire time period. We actually were appointed within about 3 to 4 months of each other. And so our service as circuit judges took us to conferences, took us to lengthy discussions and interactions. And then he was also very instrumental in helping to form the Latimer Hawkins Judicial Council, which consists of black judges all throughout the state of Florida, which at the time exceeded 100 African-American judges. That number has somewhat dwindled now due to retirements and the like, but nevertheless, it continues to be an opportunity for us to communicate and encourage one another. Well, in the year 2009, his service was rewarded. Prior to that, of course, his colleagues elected him to be Chief Judge of the 18th Circuit, again a first. Then in 2009, he was appointed by Governor Crist to the Florida Supreme Court, being the 85th Justice of the Florida Supreme Court. You can get more details about his background, again, if you'll just Google his name, James E.C. Perry. Above all of that, I find that his concern and care for people, his concern and care for doing the right things, and helping to be a voice of reason on the Florida Supreme Court has been astounding. And yet, in spite of all the things that he does, he still finds time to come out and talk to young people. He's concerned about you and your success because he doesn't want to see you end up incarcerated, doesn't want to see you end up, unfortunately, like the young man that's being laid to rest this morning. And so we're talking about a conversation here today that will help to strengthen you and to get you off on the right foot for this 2014-2015 school year. So at this particular time, I'd like to welcome to you none other than the Honorable Justice James E.C. Perry, the 85th Justice of the Florida Supreme Court.
You may be seated. You may be seated. Thank you. Isn't it strange that princes and kings and clowns that caper in sawdust rings and common folk like you and me are builders of eternity? To each is given a bag of tools, a shapeless mass, a set of rules. For each to make, their life is flown, a stumbling block or a stepping stone. Thank you, Hugh, for that marvelous introduction. It's the best introduction I've ever had, except the time when I had to introduce myself. Hugh and I go back many, many, many years through many phases of our careers. And I was able to meet with your president before I came here, and I also met with your distinguished, are you the vice president or the chancellor? Provost, okay, provost. They keep having these title changes. So to distinguished faculty and honored platform guests, and also congratulations to you, the Wildcat Nation. It is an honor to be here among so many extraordinarily and talented individuals. You are matriculating here to become better prepared for this increasingly complex global society and anemic job market. You may not be able to follow the career paths that you have mapped out for yourself, if in fact you mapped out a career path, but take it from me, it is those unpredictable avenues along life's journey that can offer the greatest rewards. 52 years ago, I was in your shoes at St. Augustine's University. They called it St. Augustine because it was named after St. Augustine's of Hippo, and the other saint is St. Augustine's. I think one is Latin and one is Spanish. St. Augustine's of Hippo was black. Of course, our great nation was a different place in its development. As a child of the 60s, we were faced with the challenges of segregation in America, apartheid, voter suppression, police abuse, poverty, taxation without representation, and overall marginalization of us as a people. Unfortunately, as you can see, the more things change, the more they remain the same. Discrimination and segregation ruined lives, corrupted those who enforced America's apartheid, and kept large segments of our society locked in a vice of poverty and neglect. It was not just the black Americans who suffered, our entire country suffered in its loss of moral standing in the world, in its tendency to let lawlessness trump reason, and its determination to keep an entire people from becoming truly productive participants in the betterment of our nation. What I did not realize then was that my greatest educational experience was still lay ahead of me. Today, I would like to share some of what I've learned with you. Now, he was from Imperial Polk County. And there was a farmer over there that had the only talking dog in the world. So a fellow from New York heard about this, and he flew down to Orlando National Airport, rented a car, drove over to Mulberry, Florida, where this guy was, and he pulled up in front of the farmer's yard, and the farmer was sitting on a stump, whittling. And he said, "Farmer Brown?" He said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I understand you have the world's only talking dog." He said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You mind if can I talk with him?" He said, "Yes, sir." So where is he? He's right over yonder. So he went over there, engaged the dog. He said, "Dog?" The dog said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Tell me about yourself." He said, "Well, I was in Desert Storm 1 and 2. I was a cadaver dog for 9/11. I helped TSA sniff out drugs at the airport. And I've been pretty much all over the world." So the guy was astonished. He went to the farmer and said, "Farmer," he said, "are you willing to sell your dog?" He said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Well, how much?" He said, $75. said, what? $75 for the only talking dog in the world? She said, yeah, that's a lion dog. He do none of the stuff you told you he did. First of all, the qualities that contribute to success and happiness, the most important is integrity. If your words and deeds can't be trusted, you will not live up to your potential. We live in a very competitive time, but the one competition that you cannot fail is to be the most ethical, trustworthy person you can be. Over the course of your career, you will undertake challenging assignments, some of which will be controversial. This means that at some times you will be unpopular with some people. But be sure you believe in what you are doing. It is unpleasant when others disapprove of you, but it is intolerable when you disapprove of yourself. As Chief Justice Charles Evan Hughes once said, a man has to live with himself. He should see to it always that he has good company. So never, ever, ever compromise your integrity. No exceptions. Second, people matter. The most important skills that you can have is your ability to build and to nurture relationships. The friendships and relationships that you establish here at BCU will probably be your most important lifelong friendship and relations for the remainder of life, for good or for evil. Remember this, ultimately your relationship with family, friends, and coworkers will make or break you. If you offer people respect and dignity, if you value their worth as individuals, if you are honest and kind in your treatment of others, you will know success. You will build bridges while others build barriers. You will make friends while others merely make contacts. Your relationships will see you through hard times, the heartaches, and despair. And the goodwill that you have bestowed upon you and those around you will be there for you to draw upon, just as if you had deposited in a bank account for a rainy day. Remember that everyone has something to give, to teach, and to make you think. Just listen, respect, and try to understand whenever possible, and try to help others. You may never realize the impact of seemingly small gestures of thoughtfulness. The third thing I want to talk about is obstacles, failures, and defeats. They're not necessarily bad things. None of you will make it through this life unscathed. There are highs and lows everywhere. You must learn to challenge disappointments into something positive. Take it from me, someone who has known a little bit about weathering disappointments. After graduating from St. Augustine in May of 1966 with a degree in business administration with a concentration in accounting, I landed a good job at IBM as a junior accountant. You got to remember, during that time, things just started to break in 1966. When I majored in business administration, there was not even a possibility of me being hired in that area in 1962. And I was told that you should major in business education because if things go bad, you can always teach. And I told them that I would take my chances on the system breaking. And it did break. This was November of 1966, and the Vietnam conflict was escalating, and people were dying. Like most young men my age, the draft was not a welcome interruption in my life, but still, my country called, and I answered the call. However, I decided to make the best of the situation. I volunteered for the draft and decided to attend Officers Candidate School. Officers Candidate School training was challenging, intense, and not always a pleasant experience. But it was ultimately very rewarding. It was there that I learned to make decisions quickly, always focus on achieving a successful outcome, and showing respect for my superiors and subordinates. The Army taught me to lead from the front and to adjust to ever-changing situations and environments. It has proven to be an invaluable experience, one that I might have never had it not been for the draft. The poem that I recited a few minutes ago, one of my favorites by R.L. Sharp, describe the choices we all face when we open our bag of tools. I know that the interruption of the draft could have been a stumbling block in my life, but instead, it was one of life's stepping stones. April the 4th, 1968, a tragedy occurred that would change my life forever. Most of you might not have been born the day that Dr. King was assassinated, was murdered. You may not fully comprehend what a critical time it was in our nation's history, and how tragic it was for me for him to be cut down in the prime of his life. It was devastating. It could have been a stumbling block, but on April the 4th, as I sat glued to my television, watching the news coverage of Dr. King's death, a commentator came on and he asked this question. He said, "Who will lead them now? Who will lead them now?" Well, in the military, as an officer, I was the first lieutenant at this time. They said I was an officer, a gentleman, and a leader. And I decided that perhaps I can make a difference. So I decided to attend law school because 2/3 of the congressmen and the presidents were lawyers. Most of our leaders were preachers. And that was a good thing. But I thought we needed somebody on the other side that understood the legalities of what was going on. So that's the seminal moment that I decided to attend law school. I didn't know any lawyers, never had any hopes, dreams, or aspirations of going to law school. But I knew if I were going to effect real change, I needed to be on the inside to work within the political and legal systems. The battle of civil rights was not being waged in the boardrooms. They were being fought and won in the courtrooms, and that's where I wanted to be. Had I not known disappointments, I might have still been an accountant who have never been an attorney, never been a judge, and never been a Supreme Court justice. And I would have missed out on what for me has been the most rewarding and satisfying profession that I could have ever imagined. Remember, when you're down on your luck and you encounter what might seem to be insurmountable odds and obstacles, life has a way of correcting itself. Just think, as a teenager, I could not eat at the lunch counters in my hometown of New Bern, North Carolina. Signs and Jim Crow laws prohibited me from drinking water from the public water fountain or using the public restrooms. Years later, as a circuit judge, I was invited back to my hometown, and I was handed the key to the city at a formal dinner celebrating its city favorite son. Today, I am a Supreme Court justice, and even more amazing that the United States has elected and re-elected an African-American president and leader of the free world. So hang in there when times get tough. These are tough times now, but these aren't the only tough times we know. In the military, we had this saying, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. So you need to keep the faith, keep confidence in yourself, and keep your eye on the prize. Understand where you're going and where you've come from, and that nobody said it's going to be easy. But we can't stop now. Even the brightest and most dedicated among you will fail at some level. If you don't, then you're not living up to your full potential. If you don't make mistakes, it means you're not taking any risks. My advice to you is, do not accept failure. Embrace it. If you aim for the stars and you miss it, so what? You might just land on the moon. Remember, it's not what happens in your life, but how you handle it, which determines whether it becomes a stumbling block or a stepping stone. Which leads me to my fourth point. You will need courage to live a full and meaningful life. Don't be afraid to pursue the truth or to rock the boat. I need to take a Rubio moment here. I didn't get the response I expected, so that means you have been watching television. There is much that cannot be given to you by this great university. And one is courage. Courage to do the right thing as you see it. the will to never compromise what you know to be true, and the determination to be true to yourself and to live up to your full potential. These things you must find from within yourself. As they say in the church, something within me, something within me eases the pain. What does it say, Reverend?
It holds the rain.
Holds the rain. Every day hasn't been Sunday in my life, but that's the way life is. So when you find yourself in these situations, you must nurture them, and even when it's easier to abandon your principles or to sell yourself to the highest bidder, remember to sell your services, but not your soul. The ultimate act of bravery does not necessarily take place on the battlefield. It takes place each and every day in dozens of small ways when we make choices to do what is right, even when those around us encourage us to do otherwise. Listen to your conscience. It's there for a reason. Upon graduating from Columbia, my goal was to return to the South so I might use my profession in the cause of simple justice. So I sat for the Georgia bar examination. I was very disappointed when I received the results, and I didn't pass. After a week of lamenting, I learned that all 42 African Americans who sat for the bar were failed. Now that was in 1972. To give you some context, there were 38 African American members of the bar of Georgia at the time. And there appeared to be a pattern of admitting 3 African Americans applicants per year. I was told that they would pass the one that went to the University of Georgia, the one that graduated from Emory, and one other. And I said, that's great. That's me, right? But as I indicated, all of us failed. Now, I don't know whether that was coincidence or whether we were all just dumb that particular year. How could we tell? The bar did not allow for the review or confirmation of test scores. So I called a meeting of the applicants. I was in Augusta, Georgia. Most of them were in Atlanta. I called a meeting of the applicants in Georgia, in Atlanta. And I suggested we file a lawsuit against the bar examiners in Georgia. And only 16 of the 42 would join in the legal action against the bar examiners for apparent discriminatory practices. The remaining applicants were afraid of the repercussions, afraid to make waves, afraid to lend their names to something controversial. But my view was, this is why we attended law school, to right wrong, to test truth to power. The case was entitled Perry versus Sale. I was the named plaintiff. We sat for the bar exam a few months later, and somehow, miraculously, 11 of the 16 plaintiffs, including yours truly, passed the bar exam. And 13 others passed. They passed 24 in February 1973. In June of 1973, they passed 24 more African Americans. So in less than 6 months, we doubled the number of African Americans in the Georgia bar, which was extraordinary. Now, I'm not saying they were discriminating, but it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, must be a duck. At this time, there are over 2,000 African American members of the Georgia bar, and they've just elected the first African American woman as president of the Georgia bar. And I'm very proud that we found the courage to rock the boat all those many years ago. Of course, my reason for attending law school and coming back to the South was to right wrong, but I didn't expect to do that before I was a member of the bar. We currently find ourselves recovering from what economists have called the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. Think what this country and the world economy could have been spared if more people had the courage to pursue the truth and to speak to it. What if the regulators and the press had asked the banks tough questions before their collapse? What if more corporate insiders spoke out before the institution collapsed? What if we as individuals had not been so apathetic and complacent and paid attention to what was happening around us? I don't want to leave here today without urging you to keep your priorities straight. Make sure that in your bid for success, you don't forget what is really important. I could go through an enumeration, but I'm gonna just hit them briefly. Your faith, your family, and your friends. Getting your priorities straight can sometimes be a juggling act, but it is a skill that you need to master if you are to lead a full and meaningful and enjoyable life. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't address the very core of our great democracy, and that is voter education and participation. Many of our forefathers died and sacrificed their lives so that we could enjoy the opportunity to vote. But opportunity means nothing if you don't take advantage of them. We can complain about injustice, unfair policies until we're blue in the face. But if we're not informed, engaged participants in the electoral process, it all goes for naught. Voting is not just a hard-fought right, but voting is a sacred responsibility. Elections have consequences, and those who vote and participate in the process are considered and represented when appointments are made and when policies and laws are formed, which directly affect them. We cannot stay at home on any election day, primary, which is tomorrow, or the general, which is in November. My son ran for an elected office last year. He lost in the primary. Many of his supporters said that they would vote for him in November, which was the general election. You must know that what game you're playing, and you cannot wait for your ship to come in at the airport. Don't preclude yourself from running for an elective office right here now at BCU. Because leadership skills are learned, and this can and would be your laboratory. You have professors who are here to lead you and to guide you, and you must take advantage of all situations. And those leadership skills will be transferred beyond these hollowed walls, after and perhaps before your graduation. I am an ardent supporter of full participation in each and every aspect of our political process. Be a part of history. The 2014 election will have an impact for decades to come. Each and every vote is important. While voting is confidential, that is who you voted for, the fact that you have voted or failed to vote is public record. Elected officials and special interest groups know which individuals and demographic group are voting and who are not voting. Non-voters are voiceless, and by not participating, become victims of their own neglect. A former mayor of Sanford, Florida, told my wife that she didn't have to do anything for black people because they didn't vote. And she only provided service for black people out of the goodness of her heart. You cannot afford to leave your fate to the goodness of somebody's heart. It's good that she had a good heart, but the only capital in America, there are two basically. You either have money, finance, or the right to vote. I think we have more potential for voting power than we do financial power. And it's your obligation to vote, to make sure your parents vote, to make sure your neighbors vote, to make sure, I'm not telling you who to vote for, but you vote for people who have your interests at heart. Know who these politicians are. Look at what they've done before they came before you, because they will come before you this time of the year, but you don't see them any other time. So if you don't see them any other time, I mean, a good indicator of what a politician will do once they're in office is what they've done when they were not in office. If they cared about people then, they would care about people now. If they didn't care about people then, they won't care about people now. If you didn't see them then, you won't see them once they get in. But if you vote, you might not be able to elect who you want to elect, but at least they will know they have to pay attention to you. And then we will not have taxation without representation, because when you don't vote, that's what that boils down to. Throughout the history of this country, most insurrections have come about as it relates to us as a people, and I'm one of you, to keep us from engaging in the political process, to keep you from voting, to keep you from learning to read and write, to keep you minimized. And we cannot participate in that, else it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You're here to learn. Your teachers can teach you, but they cannot make you learn. And don't make it difficult for them to teach you. Be a receptacle that is open to learning, to knowledge, not just training, but intelligence, the reason to discern not just what is said on the television, but to be able to discern the difference in what is right and what is wrong. We all have that right, that ability, God-given ability to determine what's right and what's wrong. We all know right from wrong unless we have some mental challenges. So, I played basketball in high school and college, and we had this term. If a player couldn't really play that well, we didn't have to guard him. We said he's self-checked. We didn't have to check him because he can't shoot, he can't defend, so we just put our emphasis on the other people. And that's how it is in the political system. You are self-checked if you do not participate. You are voiceless, and nobody cares what you think, how many petitions you sign, how long you march, unless you engage. There's time for prayer meeting, and there's time for bear meeting. The answer is political. Political, political, political. Vote. It's a given right under our Constitution, although it wasn't in there initially, but it's in there now. And it was hard fought to get it in there. And don't you not take advantage of this opportunity, this responsibility. This is your civic responsibility. As James Madison wrote in the Federalist Papers, knowledge will forever govern ignorance. And the people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power knowledge gives. A popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy, or perhaps both. You're earning the gift of knowledge. You're not trained, because monkeys are trained. You don't want to be trained. You want to have knowledge. You want to have an education. Now you must return the gift of service. People who are honored are those who give, not those who make a lot of money. You receive by giving. You don't give to receive, but truly by giving you do receive. The torch is now passed to you with great expectations that you will carry it higher and farther than my generation was capable. You are better prepared than you think you are. Just make sure that you apply yourself. If you're a B student, B's are fine. But if you're a B student capable of making A's, B's are not fine. If you're a C student capable of making a B, C is not fine. Oh, it's passing, but it's not fine. But if you're a C student and you're doing the best you can, that's fine too. Because see, I was born and raised in the project. My mother had a third grade education. My father had a first grade education. I didn't know whether I was going to college until the last 30 days of my high school experience. So, but for the grace of God, who knows where I would have been. And make sure that you listen to people who have your interests at heart. Don't listen to people who tell you what you can't do unless you see what they're doing. If they're doing nothing, some advice you probably shouldn't take. Okay, I understand. Well, anyway, I've enjoyed this, and I hope I've benefited somebody in some small way. There are 7 members of the Florida Supreme Court. 7. There are 24 black Supreme Court justices in the entire United States. In the whole United States. At the last election in Florida, 500,000 people voted for the top of the ballot, did not vote for justices. 500,000. You know, that's civics 101. And I won't question your intelligence, but I'm gonna say some basic things. There are 3 branches of government. 2 are political. The executive branch, which is the governor, the legislative branch, they are political. Then the 3rd branch is the Supreme Court. I often say that the purpose of the Supreme Court is to protect the poor from the rich and the rich from the mob. Thank you.